is ADHD really a new condition? I hear quite frequently parents or my patients saying, you know, doctor, I think I had ADHD or something similar when I was young, but of course, 20, 30 years ago, nobody knew about ADHD. So is it something new that we invented or discovered recently? The second question is it an American condition? We are aware of the fact that in the United States, quite a large number of children, adolescents, or even adults receive a diagnosis of ADHD, and they are treated for this. So the question is it basically an American thing that we imported in the UK or in other countries worldwide? Now, when we look at the scientific evidence and more generally historical evidence, the answer to both questions is clearly no. Interestingly, the very first scientific report of children displaying characteristics that nowadays we will label as ADHD was made by Dr. George Steele in the Lancet, a very important, prestigious scientific journal, in 1902. So this was the summary of a conference he gave in London. As you can see, ironically, the very first scientific description of ADHD didn't come from the United States. It came actually from the UK by a British doctor. When we look beyond the scientific literature to popular literature, certainly we can find a number of descriptions of children presenting characteristics of ADHD in different countries. When one looks at the historic summaries of ADHD, the character of Fidgety Philip, this child in the book by Hoffman in 1845, is frequently reported as a kind of prototype of ADHD. Certainly there are many other descriptions in other countries. For instance, I reported here this figure from a French book published in 1817 on this child. So touche à tout in French means the child who touches everything, who we probably will label nowadays as ADHD. So clearly ADHD is not a new condition, it's something that has been there for quite a while. And to answer the second question, is it an American condition? I will show you this figure, which is a bit complex, but I will guide you through this figure. Right, so here we have the years from 2000 to 2016, and here we have the prevalence. So how many children out of 100 have ADHD or are treated for ADHD. So let me explain better. If you look at this line here in red, this reports what we call the real prevalence, the expected prevalence of ADHD when the diagnosis is made in a rigorous way, in a proper way. So what this line shows is that the prevalence of ADHD has not significantly changed over time in the past 20 years or so. And it is around 6-7%. So 6-7 out of 100 children, if diagnosed correctly, should have ADHD. Importantly, this line also was made based on a series of studies that have shown that the prevalence of ADHD is not significantly different from country to country, which means that roughly, if we look at United States, United Kingdom, China, Italy, and so on and so forth, roughly we have the same number of children if the diagnosis is made correctly. However, what changes quite significantly from country to country is the extent to which actually in real practice children are diagnosed really with ADHD. So these lines here in different colors report the prevalence of the treatment, of the pharmacologic treatment for ADHD. So if we look at the United States, this line here in blue, basically in the United States, roughly 6% of children with ADHD are diagnosed with ADHD and are treated. So 6% of children in the population have a diagnosis of ADHD and are treated for ADHD, which is quite close to the total number of children we expect should have ADHD. In other countries, you see that the prevalence of treatment is much lower. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the prevalence of the treatment for ADHD is less than 1%, which means that basically less than 1% of the children in the population receive a diagnosis of ADHD and are treated for this. They should be, according to studies, should be around 6-7%. Actually, we only identify less than 1% and treat them. So you see that there is clearly a need to increase awareness and training on ADHD. And so initiatives like this one should hopefully improve the awareness on this condition.